Imagine being the family members of Anthony Woolgate, Gabriel Cavari, Daniel Whitworth, or Jack Taylor. Now, I want you to imagine later finding out that, as tragic as it is, there was no way to predict the fate that 23-year-old Anthony Woolgate would ultimately endure. But imagine later finding out that 22-year-old Gabriel Cavari, 21-year-old Daniel Whitworth, and 25-year-old Jack Taylor may still be alive today had the Metropolitan Police Department done their due diligence and investigated the death of Anthony Woolgate properly. I don't know that there are any words for the tragedies that could have been prevented, but I'm here to break it all down for you guys. Hi guys, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. It's so greatly appreciated. It truly is. Before we get started, let me give you my usual disclaimer. This video is for educational purposes only. Please do not take what I say as fact. Please always do your own research and come to your own conclusions. Next, if you have not liked, subscribed, or commented yet, please consider doing so because it really helps me out and I really appreciate it. Okay, so we're going to start with 41-year-old Stephen Port. He was originally from Dagenham in the United Kingdom, and he lived there with his parents and his sister until he was in his early 30s. His dad worked as a cleaner for Dagenham Council, and his mother worked the register at a food store. Stephen would originally attend art school, but by the age of 16, his parents were no longer able to afford the school, so Port quit art school, and he trained to be a chef for 2 years. In his 20s, he would come out as being gay. Whatever. Then in his 30s, Stephen moved out of the family's home and into a one-bedroom flat in Barking. There's a bit of controversy over what Stephen Port actually did for a living. His Facebook page claims he was a special needs teacher at Westminster, Kingsway College, studied at Oxford University, and was a former seaman for the Royal Navy. Also claimed that he taught special needs children how to cook. But when reporters spoke to Stephen's parents, 73-year-old Albert Port and 74-year-old Joan Port, they said that their son was not a special education teacher. They said that he worked as a chef for around 13 years at a bus garage that was located in West Ham. What is known is that he appeared on one episode of Celebrity Chef UK in June of 2014, the same month that the body of Anthony Woolgate would be found. It was a very brief appearance, and during the episode, Stephen is seen giving meatballs and pasta to various bus drivers, with the premise of the episode being that the celebrity chefs had to prepare meals for 100 bus drivers. His parents also confirmed that him saying that he studied at Oxford University was a lie. An ex-boyfriend of Stephen's claimed that he was a door-to-door salesman. He also worked as a male escort, where he charged £200 per night per client. The Daily Mail would end up speaking to a few of his ex-clients, and surprisingly, they had wonderful things to say about him. One of his clients stated that he enjoyed his time with Stephen so much that he had actually recommended him to other friends of his. Imagine being that guy. Sending your friends out with a cereal. Imagine. Another client stated that Stephen was an absolute dream come true, going on to say that his services were even better than he had asserted. He was very straightforward and his services were better than any other escort in London. A client from the United States liked Stephen so much that he intended to bring him over to the United States to be with him. You could keep him in London, thank you. Towards the end of 2013, Port became a big fan of the date R-word GHB. The neighbor at his flat would say that he was concerned about the fact that his neighbor seemed to have a revolving door of boys coming to his flat. He went on to say that his neighbor had a ferocious appetite for meeting very young men, some of which seemed vulnerable to him, claiming he felt as though he had pedo tendencies. That's because he did. Lastly, he said that he approached Port, telling him that he was concerned about his drug use, but Port assured him that they were for personal use only and nothing sinister. Okay, I think this is a great time to shift the conversation over to a few people who actually deserve to be spoken about on this platform, okay? In June of 2014, 23-year-old Anthony Walgate was a second-year fashion and art student at the University of Middlesex. He was living away from home at this time, and it is alleged that Anthony worked as an escort from time to time as a way to make extra money. A friend of Anthony's would later say that he called him that evening as he planned to meet up with Port, telling his friend that he had just got a customer that was offering to pay him £800 for the night. He told his friend that he didn't feel comfortable with the client and gave his friend the information of where he would be just in case he ends up dead. And in the conversation that he's going to bring a pair of scissors just in case he needed them. Always trust your gut, my friends. It's typically never wrong. That would be the last time that anyone heard from Anthony until a 911 call was made at 4:18 a.m. from Stephen Port, telling police that there was a man passed out on his front steps. That he thinks he is either really drunk or had a seizure or something. When paramedics arrive, they find Anthony with no cell phone and a bottle of something inside a brown bag next to the body. When police arrived, he told them they had just gotten home from his night job. He found him on the steps and he made the call, going on to say that he attempted to smack him to wake him up, but that it wasn't working. Prior to the death of Anthony, Port had a clean record. He did, however, cross police radar New Year's Eve 2012 when a man claimed that he had given him GHB and R-worded him, but nothing ever came of it, which seems to be a common theme with this D-bag. The first paramedic on the scene would later testify that he believed the death was suspicious because of the way that the body was found, going on to say that if someone has a seizure, they wouldn't be sitting in an upright position. The paramedic thought that it would be best to cover Anthony with a blanket and to call the Metropolitan Police to look more into the death. Around a week later, police would discover that Anthony was an escort and that Port reached out to him that evening. Stephen Port would be arrested and he would be charged with perverting the course of justice by lying to police about knowing Anthony. He told police that he had met up with Anthony for consensual sex, going on to say that Anthony took some pills from his bottle and then they had sex twice. He says that he left for work and Anthony was still sleeping, so he, like most of us that hire random strangers off the internet, left Anthony asleep in his bed while he was at work. Because isn't that what everybody does when they hire random strangers off the internet? And if you do that, don't do that. Does anybody do that? Don't do that. He claims that when he got home at 3 a.m., he found Anthony dead. So rather than calling police, he dragged him outside of his flat to prevent people from believing that he was responsible for the death. Port would be arrested but bailed out of jail and wouldn't be charged until January of the following year. So instead of police looking further into the death of Anthony Walgate, they chalked it up to an accidental overdose and they closed the case. So, while on bail, Stephen Port would meet up with his next victim, 22-year-old Gabriel Kavari. He was born in Slovakia, but was living with his boyfriend in Spain before deciding to move to London in 2014. When he first moved to London, Gabriel was living with a man that he met on a dating website, But then he moved into Stephen Port's apartment on August 23rd, 2014. And he had actually made comments to his friends saying how strange Port was, but he said that he was letting him stay on his couch for free, so basically he was taking advantage of it. His parents say that he was a very gifted and talented artist. He was described as compassionate, loving, and caring. He loved being with his family and his friends, and he had dreams of making a difference in the world through his artistic talents. His body would be found on August 28th, 2014, just meters away from Stephen Port's flat, slumped up against a wall in a graveyard, in the exact same position that Anthony Walgate was found. He was found by a woman that was walking her dog. Gabriel's death would be chalked up to an accidental overdose by investigators. 3 weeks later, on September 20th, 2014, the body of 21-year-old Daniel Whitworth would be found. Daniel was described by his father as being very intelligent, very active. He loved exploring various bays and riding his bike. His body would be found in almost the exact same place as Gabriel's body was found, in the exact same position as the other two victims were found, and he would be found by the same dog walker that found Gabriel, this poor woman.
So, please God, no, please not another one. I thought, please let it be just a boy who's drunk or something. To have found two young men in exactly the same position, it did upset me a bit, and I was a bit concerned that over my reaction, really, you know, because I was trying to keep control of myself. I really did feel sorry for both of them, for the families.
The same woman. Inside of Daniel's right hand was an unaliving note, allegedly written by Daniel. The note read, "I am sorry to everyone, mainly my family, but I can't go on anymore. I took the life of my friend Gabriel Klein. He was just having some fun at a mate's place, and I got carried away and gave him another shot of G. I didn't notice while we were having sex that he stopped breathing. I tried everything to get him to breathe again, but it was too late. It was an accident, but I blame myself for what happened, and I didn't tell my family I went out. I know I would go to prison if I had to go to the police, and I can't do that to my family. And at least I can at least be with Gabriel again. I hope he will forgive me. By the way, please do not blame the guy I was with last night. We only had sex, then I left. He knows nothing of what I have done. I have taken what G I have left with sleeping pills, so if it doesn't kill me, this is what I deserve. Feeling dizzy now, as I took 10 minutes ago, so hoping you understand my writing. I dropped my phone on the way here, so it should be in the grass somewhere. Sorry to everyone, Daniel P." Please never check the handwriting on Daniel's letter, or check with his family to even see if the letter was legit. Because of this, the family of Daniel would have to spend the next year believing that their son unalived himself because of the guilt that he was feeling by accidentally killing his friend. Can we just stop for a minute and think about how twisted this is? Like, this is awful. Imagine that family. An entire year they thought that their child did this to himself because of this overwhelming guilt that he was feeling. In February of 2015, Stephen Port was sentenced to 8 months in jail for lying to police about the death of Anthony Walgate. He would only serve 4 of the 8 months he was sentenced to, and in June of 2015, Port would be released from jail. And even though police seized Port's computer after the death of Anthony Walgate, they never searched it. Had they searched the computer, they would have found searches for things such as date, R, word, Porn. Had they looked further into Port, they would know that he was in a 2-year relationship with a 16-year-old boy when he was 32 years old. What are you doing? What are you doing? On September 14th, 2015, the body of 25-year-old Jack Taylor of East London would be found propped up against the outer perimeter wall to the graveyard of Abbey Green in almost the exact same location as Gabriel and Daniel. Jack Taylor was a forklift truck driver who lived with his parents and worked nights for the company, and it is said that he loved his job. September 13th, 2015, Jack arrived home from a night out at a place called the Trading Club. When he arrived home that night, his father was still awake. He spoke to his dad briefly and he went to bed. Soon after he arrived home, though, he would meet Stephen Port on a dating app called Grindr and get into a taxi to go meet up with him. CCTV footage shows the two men walking through the streets that night. These would be the last images of Jack, having no idea that this is the moment he was essentially walking towards his death. Jack would be found without his cell phone, just like the others, in the same position as the others. Once again, instead of investigating the case, they chalked it up to an overdose. And they closed the case. Had it not been for the family of Jack refusing to accept this as their brother and son's manner of death, who knows how many more victims of Stephen Port's there would be.
Why are you searching for boy drugged rape? And that search, I can tell you, or some of those searches occurred during the evening of the 12th, shortly before midnight, and then some of them occurred in the early hours of the morning, later on in the morning after 4 o'clock, and onwards later on that day on the 13th, on Sunday the 13th, the time when Jack Taylor is either dead or dying. You're searching for boy drugged rape, etc. Why is that?
No, just generally looking for general porn.
That's not general porn, Stephen, is it? You're specifically searching for videos of porn to do with people who are either asleep or have been drugged and are being raped. You've typed in the word rape, haven't you?
Yeah, it's just searching for random videos. What's nothing specific in particular?
Nothing specific. Is that right?
Yeah.
It sounds quite specific. You were searching for these videos before Jack came over to the barking area, and then when he was in the barking area, you were searching for these videos as well. Is that because you were with him?
No.
And that you just drugged him as well?
No, definitely not.
Were you watching these videos whilst having sex with him, raping him whilst he'd been drugged?
No, definitely not.
Definitely not.
The family of Jack says they told their concerns to police a number of times, and each time their concerns were dismissed. It was at that point that Jack's family realized that the police were useless, and they began to conduct their own investigation. This would be when they found out about the deaths of Anthony, Gabriel, and Daniel, along with the striking similarities of all four. It wasn't until Jack's family stumbled across this information that enough pressure was put on police to take a closer look at these cases. Finally, on October 15th, 2015, police arrested Port at his flat and brought him in for questioning. After 4 days of police interviews and searches of his home, phone, and laptop, on October 18th, 2015, Port was finally charged with the deaths of Anthony Walgate, Gabriel Cavari, Daniel Whitworth, and Jack Taylor. After his arrest hit the media, another 8 men would come forward to discuss their encounters with Port. One man was a teenager at the time. He says he met Port on Grindr and ended up going to his home one night in 2012. He says that Port offered him a glass of wine, and when he tasted it, he claimed it tasted bitter. He also remembers seeing what he described as a sludge at the bottom of the glass, which the sludge turned out to be GHB. The next thing he remembers is waking up to Port R-wording him. But he was still so high that he just fell back into unconsciousness. The following morning when he woke up, Port acted as if nothing happened, and the team, being too scared to say anything, grabbed his things, left the flat, and never spoke about it again until after Port's arrest in 2015. A second male, this time a man in his 20s, came forward to say that he met Port in mid-2014 on a website by the name FitLads. He said that on their fifth date, Port offered him poppers, which are described as legal party that are most commonly used during sex. Because this man didn't drink or take drugs, the poppers made him fall asleep. He says that he remembers waking up and Port offering him a glass of water. He says he drank the water and then he fell back to sleep once again. The following morning when the man woke up, he was in his underwear, and because his family was unaware of his sexuality, he never reported the incident to police. In November of 2016, Stephen Port was finally sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. 17 members of the Metropolitan Police Department were under investigation over the numerous red flags that they missed and the lives that were cost because of their negligence. The mother of Anthony Walgate, Stephen's first victim, said that the family received no compassion from the police department. Their concerns were dismissed, and they had to literally chase them down for information. The Metropolitan Police Department blamed the negligence in the Stephen Port case on 5 specific factors. 1. Not enough training is provided to instill in an investigative mindset, such as sudden death training for response officers and their supervisors, and training to cover the lessons learned from the Stephen Port case. 2. Oversight and supervision are poor, such as a lack of supervision when inexperienced response officers attend a report of an unexpected death, and inadequate oversight of death reports for the coroner. 3. Record keeping is unacceptable, such as poor quality death reports with basic details omitted or incorrectly recorded, confusing case management systems, and incorrectly packaged, labeled, and recorded property and exhibits. 4. Policy and guidance are confusing, such as an overwhelming amount of policy and guidance, often undated and poorly constructed, that cause confusion. 5. Crime analysis processes are inadequate, which can lead to the reliance on luck to identify links between deaths at a local level and make it less likely that any links between minor incidents and crimes that may be precursors to more serious events. The investigation concluded that they often hear that a force is inexperienced and that its resources are stretched. And although this complaint is accepted, it does not absolve the Metropolitan Police Department of its responsibility to meet basic requirements. All right, guys, if you're still here, thank you. I love you, and I appreciate you so very much. Please like, subscribe, and comment if you haven't yet and you feel so inclined to. I really appreciate it. And until next time, stay safe out there.